One, and welcome back to Crossroads of Cognizance, the one stop shop where we talk about all things woo woo. We discuss magic, energy, and it's all here to offer different perspectives, support um, you in your life. And we're talking about the things that we've learned, experienced, and we're hoping that in that process, you are going to share with us in the comment section. So, on that note, if you're catching us, definitely click the broadcast if you're on Facebook. And if you're on YouTube, just do what you do and comment. First, hello. Hi, Deb. And and we'll just make this a community experience because that's what it's all about. It's all about us coming together with you and having community. Speaking of that, that is our topic of the show today. We are talking about um, community work versus solo work. And um, we're having that conversation in with regard to energy, magic, and we're kind of covering the benefits and the shortcomings of both. We've touched on this topic lightly before, but we're going to take a deep dive and see what works for others, what has worked for us, and take that journey there. But we have introductions to make if you've never been here before, and strangely enough, I'm gonna let Katrina go first.
Wow, I don't know if I can do that or not. My name's Katrina Rasbold. I'm half of the team that makes up Crossroads Occult. My husband is the other half. We do spell work for people professionally. We also make and sell very specific magical products on our website at crossroadsoccult.com. I do readings for people. I also do spiritual cleansings, and I'm a published author. I've also been a leader of coven work for a little over 40 years and have done extensive solo work as well. So that's where my conversation about, or my part of the conversation about today will address is what I've seen for pros and cons, which of course isn't going to be everybody's experience. I'm also the author of How to Create Your Own Magical Working Group, which is a book specifically about how to put together a magical group if you're wanting to create a coven or a topic driven spiritual group that you're um, wanting to do group work with people. But I'm
Excellent.
not here by myself. I'm here with.
Dahlia Rose. I'm Dahlia Rose. I'm the founder of the Conduit School. I serve my community as a healer, a teacher, and a conduit for high vibration energies. I do this by guiding my students with spiritual development, energy work, meditation, crystals, always crystals, services, counseling, and I take the time to kind of cosmically weave together ancient practices and supportive practices to bring transformation into the lives of those who seek me out. You know, I've uh, I've not done a lot of advertising. A common phrase with me is why didn't I know about you? And that's because most of my work and even the practice that I had in the brick and mortar store was very much word of mouth. But we held groups based on that, and that's where my expertise in all of this is coming from. Um, Probably about beyond my shop, working at another shop before that. So I'd say at least about 7 years of holding groups, doing one on one work, doing solo work myself. That's where all of this is kind of pouring in from. And, over those years, I was really able to expand the way that people think about healing, help them reconnect with their bodies. And empowerment has always been my greatest goal and desire for people. So we're going to empower you today with topics on group work and solo work. So um, we always kind of start these particular topics with definitions. And so that is to say, I think we have an opportunity to talk about three paths instead of two. And this kind of came to me just now, Katrina. So we did
Go
pre-show, and
with
I was
it. Go.
so community work being obviously, or maybe even four definitions. My brain's doing the ADHD thing, guys. Roll with me.
Girl, you got to get some Adderall.
I've never tried that, never had it. I don't know. I hear different stories. Anyway, community work being like a group of people coming together to support either a cause, a purpose, or to push the needle forward for the group itself. And then we touched lightly on kind of what a coven is, but I feel like we can find coven-esque groups out in the world where you're coming together specifically to do magical workings or energy work, like a
Mhm.
healing group. I feel like a healing group kind of has a coven vibe.
Really
As
does. Yeah.
And then there is solo work, which is the one-to-one, you and your healer. And then there's the healer or the individual doing just the work as one
Mhm.
individual. So we've got we've got a couple paths to travel down. And we're
So if
probably
if we
mingling.
break that down, we've got group work, which is working with multiple individuals toward a common goal.
Yes.
We have got, I want to make sure I'm understanding all of them that you put out there. We've got, so that's the group work. And a healing group could definitely fall into the category of that um, common goal type vibe.
Mhm.
Whether it's magical work or healing work or self-improvement work or whatever that might be. We have got the one-on-one, which is when you're meeting with a counselor, mentor, whatever that might be, or a peer group or whatever. And then we've got working solo. What was the fourth one? I think I missed it.
So we combined, I separated like community work
Okay.
with from the coven piece.
I understand. Okay. I
Coven
just wanted
healing
to make
group
sure
is.
before we move forward, I was understanding your divisions. So with community work, do you mean things like, I don't know, what comes to mind for me is bake sales. What do you consider community work?
So when I was kind of coming up in the energetic world, my mentor would talk about coming together and doing like earth healing, or coming together and there's trouble in the Middle East, or large world tragic event, and getting together with others to send healing to those. Where I feel like the separation is coven work or healing group is more centered around the people in the group
Okay.
versus, so one being global, the other
All right.
being.
I could go along with that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe it's
That
not
works.
separate though. I'm being
No,
choosy.
well, I think it depends on the group. And I think that I think it's a reasonable separation to look at each of those situations separately. Even if one group does do both, it's good to look at those as different animals because they have a different vibe.
Right. Different vibe, different intention. And that's kind of
Hmm.
what we're talking about today,
Right.
I guess. It's like the intention of your community group versus your solo work. So with those scattered definitions, um, we can look at our own experiences as far as those are concerned. So
Sure.
um, what does coven work, magical work look like for you on a community scale?
On a community scale, we did a ritual immediately after 9/11 happened. I think that was the last time that we did a global outreach group combined effort. And it was kind of an emergency meeting sort of thing. It was a group that had been working together for many, many, many years. And we were all of a like mind as to what needed to happen next. That's one of your biggest challenges with anything political. And often group work tends toward the political.
Mhm.
And you have to make sure everybody in there is on the same page. And it's interesting how, in situations in a magical or a spiritual community, that people are not always forthright about how they feel about certain things because they're afraid they're going to be shunned or ridiculed or in some way minimized. And it's the same with church. I know a lot of people that go to church that wouldn't talk about the fact that they're in my coven also.
Mm.
There's certain things that, are just not brought up. But for instance, with a spiritual group, a lot of people, let's say, okay, here in California, and I know it's the same in other places, there are staunchly conservative Republican witches. Now, when
Huh.
I think about that, I don't see how that marries up, but I know that it does. It doesn't fit my brain, but there are people who identify as witches, who practice in covens, who are extremely conservative and
Sure.
who support political candidates I would not support.
Right.
So let's just say, for instance, that you walk into a Reiki share, not even a coven, but a Reiki share, where we're moving energy and we're helping some woman who's struggling with patriarchal reproductive squanching
Mm.
and is
That was well
having trauma.
phrased.
Let's just say that she's having trauma in her abdomen for that reason, and everybody's working on it. And a person in that group might not jump at the idea of identifying themselves as supporting a candidate who is the problem, is what I'm trying not to say names here, but they might be uncomfortable with that. And so you don't always know, and that's the biggest challenge with community work, is making sure that this cart is pulling the horse in the right direction, or in the same, it doesn't have to be the right direction, the same direction. And it's
Absolutely.
like herding cats. It's insane. Just if you've got 15, 20 people in a group, and you're trying to make sure that all are having the same vision of what we're doing to move this energy forward. And so that's my thought on community work, is that the biggest challenge is making sure everybody's on the right page and nobody is going, well, but, and pulling the inner part of the energy away.
Well, and the well but is energetic. As you're saying, it's never going to be out loud questions. It's going to be the stuttering and the stammering in the head. And the
Mm-hmm.
thing that stood out to me about your example is what kind of energy, let's say everybody, it is a healing circle, what kind of energy is being poured into the situation? Is if you don't, if you assign yourself to supporting or believing a particular person or political space, that
Mm-hmm.
doesn't stop at the door. And so if you believe what's being worked on is wrong, it can hinder your ability to send
Mm-hmm.
energy. It can become disruptive. And I think in a balanced community space, there needs to be space for like, hey, I'm just not going to show up on this one, or, I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
excuse myself because I feel compromised, or, and there not be any questions. And that's not something you commonly see in community
Mm-hmm.
spaces. I have
Right.
definitely been a part of some things, even energy work wise. So we're not any sort of official coven or anything like that, where if there was dissension or questions, you were ostracized.
Mm-hmm.
And so that does happen. I
It sure
think that
does.
I think that in the community spaces that I would run, I think we were very fortunate. I'll say that because I'm pretty upfront about whatever your beliefs are, you're welcome into spaces with me. And I'm also very protective about the people in that space. So if you find challenge, like bow out now. And I would actually kind of say that, standing in front of a group of meditators, if you feel like you're going to have an issue with another person in this room, or you feel uncomfortable, you know just you can whisper it to me, you can, whatever the case is, you can excuse yourself. But what I don't want is force, and what I don't want is like darting, eyes and energy back and forth. And
And
that
you know,
has to,
sometimes go ahead.
yeah, go ahead.
No, I was gonna jag. Go ahead.
Well,
I
no,
was
I was
going
just
to a
saying,
different.
sometimes that kind of has to be said when you're working in community spaces. So even on an energetic level, to me, that's part of creating safety. And
Absolutely.
another piece of safety created by those distinctions, actually found recently in my current membership group, is giving permission for people to not be space holders. Um, in a
Hmm.
community space, like if you're typically used to holding the energy or being the anchor in the room or being the rock for people, giving people permission not to do that as it's an automatic response creates a different way for us all to be on the same page, like either all in a receptive place or all in a giving place, whatever the intention is.
Hmm. So, a couple of thoughts on that. Let me write something down real quick so I can come back to it. Um, you mentioned about how that butt is going to be energetic. And there are times when you know, even if you say things like, hey, if you think you're going to have a problem here, I need you to step out. Um, a lot of times people don't know if they're going to have a problem until they're in the working and something gets triggered. Or even as you're facilitating, you might say something that they're like, I don't know that I'm completely on board with that. And I don't think I want to lend energy toward that. And that's something that can happen. And it's very uncomfortable as a facilitator or a leader to say, okay, the energy isn't moving fluidly. Something's off in here. If you're feeling uncomfortable, I need you to step out. Because if that happens, everybody's going to look at the person that steps out. And everybody's going to want to know, well, what we're doing is great. Why do they have a problem with that? Which that will completely derail the energy of what you're doing.
So I think I see what you're saying. And I think that the other like benefit or what do I want to say? Not benefit, but fortune would be in my group space, like you're dealing with covens, same
Hmm.
people, relatively same energy.
Hmm.
Rarely are you, I don't know, maybe rarely are you inviting in new
Right.
bodies.
Hmm.
For me, there was always
Which makes
a,
you more
a,
vulnerable
a
because, right.
rolling door of people. Like
Yeah.
we would always have this, we would have the same people, but
Hmm.
it was a space where if you're a stranger and you did want to leave, it was okay. So I'd usually wait for like eyes closed, nobody's looking at you, you can sneak out the
Hmm.
back door kind of
Oh, that's
thing.
good. Another
But
thing I
the
recommend.
benefit was being strangers.
Oh, that is good.
Yeah.
What I would say is that when you have that continual flow of people in, people out, it causes you to know people less
Hmm.
and therefore to predict their responses less. And that can equate to more surprises in this
Sure.
regard. But one thing that is a wonderful technique that Phaedra Bonowitz taught that I just love is called holding the field. And that's when you're in a situation that is group work and maybe you're not totally on board with what's happening.
Mhm.
Not to the point that you're just, well, fuck this, and you storm out, but where you're just like, I'm not so sure. And what she suggests is to go to a place of neutrality where you just allow the energy to continue to move without contributing to it, but
Hmm.
without derailing it at all. And that's when you just kind of pull yourself back. You can, even if you're close to other people, visualize that you're joining together the person on the left with the person on the right and just kind of pushing yourself back a little bit if you're not comfortable with that and if you're not feeling a need to leave. But the main thing about community work that I would say, and I feel like this conversation, which is a very positive conversation, kind of took a negative lean, is that you should never, whether it's coven group or a more fluid attendance group, you should never contribute energy to something that's causing a negative reaction in you.
Oh no, yeah,
And so
that's
that's really important. Yeah, just for
yeah.
decorum, you don't just stick around.
No, not at all. And I think this is really pushing us towards a very fascinating session and conversation because in healing groups and things like that, that fluidity allowed us to have, on the one hand, yes, we may be susceptible to, whatever energies come. And at the same time, it allowed us to implement more complex energies that maybe we would not have come across if we were a closed group. So, a shaman comes in from out of town and happens to see the event, comes in, and we're all checking in, we're all connected with our own safety and our own, energy and feeling okay about moving forward together. We now have another layer that we've not interacted with before. We now
Sure.
have, even if it's not like a magical person, we may be connected to somebody who's deeply connected to their ancestors. And so
Mm-hmm.
now, those ancestors are giving freely of their support energetically to whatever the cause is, versus like a magical working where you probably want to be more precise, especially if it's, say, like a sabbat, or like you know um uh maybe like, I don't want to be like superficial about it, but like an abundance ritual, or like,
Mm-hmm.
a ritual for the coven per se. I can understand wanting more precise energy, wanting to be certain of people. So I think it's an interesting um, contrast. I think
Mm-hmm.
is what I'm trying to say,
Yeah, I
because
agree.
there's shortcomings and possibilities on both sides. I mean,
They're
nobody
really
wants the energy
absolutely.
vampire in their group,
No,
you
you're
know.
absolutely right. Yeah.
But at the same
And
time,
the way that people respond also isn't necessarily black or white, good or bad.
right?
Um, for example, I mean, we used this a little bit before, but if you come to a healing session like a Reiki share or something that's so innocuous, you don't ever imagine anything is going to come up that would affect you to the level that you would need to step out. You're just going to come there, push energy on some people, help some people, and show people what Reiki sounds like. But let's say that you do get somebody there who's having a lot of turmoil reproductively. It comes out that when she was younger, she had an abortion, that she hasn't gotten past the guilt of that, that she's having a really hard time letting go of those feelings. She was never able to work those through. Let's say that somebody in the Reiki group has a very big problem with abortion. You
Mm,
know, they don't want to legislate anybody's bodies, but internally they have a problem with that. Maybe they are infertile and they feel like that's not fair, that somebody should be able to get pregnant and just get rid of it. So there's conflict there, and that is going to convolute the group work that's happening around that table. Or let's say that somebody else is triggered because they had an abortion and they didn't work through their feelings. And so all of a sudden, they have this surge of
mm,
of uncomfortable feelings. And that's why it's so important that anytime you're doing community work or coven work, that you do really check in with yourself and
yeah,
make sure that the energy you're pushing around is clean and clear and good and just promoting rather than detracting.
absolutely, absolutely. And um, I think that with the Reiki shares piece, I can recall some situations where people have come back and said they went to a group, and they felt like one person was sort of taking, and
Mhm.
it reminded me of kind of what you said prior to us hopping on, which is that it's not necessarily supposed to be promoting like a counseling space.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that um, on an energetic level, checking in is 100% important. And maybe we're sort of entering the realm of needing to speak to what's shared, or how we're going to move through
Mm-hmm.
trauma and things like that. In fact, for me, when we were talking about community work versus solo work, anything involving deeply rooted trauma, and maybe you don't know if it's deeply rooted or not, but I would say if you're hesitant to talk about it, then it's probably deeper than you think. If you feel any sort of resistance to sharing, it's probably deeper than you think. And group and community work can be supportive, but that to me screams solo work. Like, get your practitioner,
Mm-hmm.
get your therapist, get your whoever to support you, and should be more in the one on one space rather than community work. Like, I think with community healing work, it's great to deal with the dusting off and the superficial layers of what's going on, but if it's deeper than that, we're probably tracing something that should be more personal, more solo
Mm-hmm.
oriented.
And, I've been in multiple situations, and I can't even count how many times that something like, let's say that I'm um, teaching a class series, and I'm just going to demonstrate the limpia. I'm just going to demonstrate this spiritual cleansing. Okay, there's this technique we do. It's called, spiritual cleansing. This is how you do it. Can I have a volunteer from the audience to pop up? And you start doing it, and the person just starts weeping and breaking
Mm.
down as you're cleaning, and something's releasing, and the egg is just a freaking mess. It turns into, wow, this person is really in trouble, and this is not the correct space to manage that.
Mm.
And I like to think, and we talked about this in the pre-show, I like to think about it kind of like you would with church. If you are in a Christian church, there might be times that you have a prayer circle for somebody because they have gone through a specific trauma. And so the whole group is working toward the benefit of that person to help them heal and help them get better. But you don't focus on that person every single week,
Oh no.
every single meeting. And there have been covens that I've been in, not the ones that I've led, but the ones I've been in as a participant, that, oh my God, every single freaking meeting is like group support. And it just all turns into listening to people tell their wretched stories. And there's a time and a place for that. But you come away from it just feeling depleted and exhausted, and like you really didn't do a whole lot of good, and almost as though there was no room for you if you didn't have a trauma. You didn't matter
Mm.
if you don't have a trauma. If you don't have a trauma, then your job is to help these other people. But it's the same 5 people every single time.
Mm.
And that's not the way that I feel group work is supposed to be. If you want to have a peer group that gets together and works specifically on those things, that's one thing. That means that that's made for that.
Right.
But when you are having a group experience that's supposed to be creating goals and energetic targets for the entire group, I don't think it should be as much um, focused on a handful of people.
Sure, sure. And so, as we start to consider community work versus solo work, one of the big things is set an intention. What are we actually here for? Um, in my healing circle, so we did both. We did we would do like group work around forgiveness. We do group work around ancestors. We do group, and then I had like separate healing groups where you're coming in and we're all sitting in a circle and I'm going one by one working on you and doing like a little mini healing. And I have to say, I never found that it was something where we'd focus on one person. It almost seemed like that intention piece was able to lay the groundwork for, hey, we're all here for the same thing. But I do think the risk is higher, say in like a healing group where you may
Mhm.
find that it ends up being focused on one individual or another, versus say like the abundance group where we're coming to change our mindset, or even in the forgiveness space. I think one of the things that really allowed people to kind of diffuse that selfish energy is being given permission to not be on board with forgiving something, so they at least know what's coming up in their field for forgiveness,
Mhm.
and then being able to say, I'm not ready. And then it was like the stories surrounding why they're not ready would disappear because they didn't have to defend themselves. And I think that's kind of where I'm traveling to, as far as
Mhm.
when people sort of get very self focused. It's a need to convince, a need to defend, a need to prove
Mhm.
or validate. And I don't know. I think intention and permission can alleviate at least some of those energies, not everything.
Mhm.
You want
I'm
to
very
cover?
excited that Bram is in this conversation because Bram has had extensive group experience in many different kinds of groups. And so they will be very well positioned to join in on this conversation. And, I really had to think about the type of group I wanted to have when I was
Mm,
starting a magical group, because the way that you lay the foundation when you're first starting out and the intention you set is really going to guide where that energy goes. It's
absolutely.
going to affect the people you invite to be present with you. It's going to invite the way that you proctor the group situations. And there are some, and I'm going to say this with as much kindness as I can, there are some personality types that are very spotlight centered.
Mm,
And a lot of those people, like you were saying, have those needs of needing to be validated, and also really importantly needing to be heard, needing to feel like somebody really gets the challenges that they're having. And that's important, and it's important that a group promote those ideals. The challenge that you have with that is there's some people who, no matter how much trauma they are in, will never speak up.
mm,
They don't feel worthy of that kind of attention to their
right.
problem. They feel like whatever problem somebody else is having is worse than what they're going through. And so you get that weird imbalance based on the personality that is willing to step up and say, hey, my boyfriend left me at the altar and I need to talk about this for the next 17 coven meetings. Are y'all down with that? Versus the person who says, well, my mother died and I
Mm,
don't feel like talking about it in front of 20 people. So, it gets weird. It does just get weird. And I've always been very wary of specifically coven situations, since we're floating between these two conversations.
mhm,
Coven situations that turn into, I don't want to say psychological warfare, but almost like a pop psychology healing group, as
mm,
opposed to being there to do the magic and do the work. I think we
right.
need to stay to script as much as possible. And if we're needing something different than that, have a private meeting with one or two or four or five of your group members that you're specifically trusting, that you really value their advice, and not putting it out there before the whole group. There's a time and a place. There's sometimes that getting it all out there is great. And when we're talking universal or community work, that is not the place for your concern. That is the exact opposite
Oh
of what we're
no.
doing with community work.
I feel no, no, no.
Yeah,
It's not
no,
about
get
you.
the eyes out of there. There's no I in team.
Bram, exactly right. Saying here, and expectations and momentum. If you set a particular expectation or
Mhm.
tone, it is very difficult to pivot away from that once they the participant
Yeah,
have set expectations.
very
Yes.
true. Yep, that.
Um,
So
yeah,
also what I wanted to bring up is that there is a different vibe, and this is going to be part of, I'm sure, the whole last part of our conversation. There's a different vibe to group work versus solo or one-on-one work. When you have the full magical or healing attention of a group of even 7 or 8 people or more turned onto you with the unified goal of helping you feel better about whatever you're going through, whatever trauma you're having, that is an amazing feeling, and it is very addictive. It will get you so high to have all those people focused on you and your needs. It doesn't mean you're selfish, it means you're thirsty. And so putting all of that attention and energy on one person is very addictive and feels really amazing. One of the things I teach in my classes is that idea of going back to the Newtonian laws of energy conservation. And when you have multiple forces working against one part of resistance, you're going to have greater progress.
absolutely.
Same thing with group work. If you can get a number of people pulling the cart in the same direction and having the same goal, you will accomplish your goal so much faster. That's why prayer circles work.
Right.
But if they're going in different directions, you'll be pulling your hair out. It's insane.
Um, I think that you started to touch on the addiction piece, and that kind of threw me because there's space for it to be extremely uncomfortable too. Like one of the group situations that I recall in the early days of my doing work, it was a group where we were activating our Merkabas, right? And
Hmm.
so this is an energy field around you, and we're
Yeah.
activating it. And I was like, I don't know what this is, but my mentor could have said we were making macaroni cards, and I would have been there. So I went only to find that there was a part of this group work where everybody's hands are facing you, you're on a table, they're over you. And I remember being like so uncomfortable.
Oh.
Um, yeah, it was weird. I can't say it was addicting or that it felt good or that it was like this
Hmm.
bright spot in my life because they were well meaning. I'm sure they were, there were some strangers in there. They were very nice. I didn't come away, hurt, injured, or otherwise, had no crazy after effects. But
But
man,
you
in
want it
that
off that
moment,
table, huh?
I if I could have like flown off the table through the roof, I would have because
Oh,
it was too much. Um, and maybe there's healing in that as well, like recognizing what's there. But I think
sure.
there's two sides to the coin. The like you said earlier, the person who never says anything, and the person that always says something, and where that goes. Um, Community work has or group work has it has its purposes. Like I have been sort of not I've been opened by this conversation with coven work because in my mind it is you come, you have magical intention, you share, and then maybe afterward as you're doing the because I don't have a better word for it right now, networking piece where we've all accomplished the magical work and we're just chit
Hmm.
chatting.
Yeah,
That's
socialize.
maybe the place where you socialize. Thank you. I don't know why my brain couldn't reach for that word. That's where you might one on one, share with somebody that you're close with, kind of your
Hmm.
feelings and things of that nature. Not necessarily like, okay, well, we came here to do this Sabbath, and oh, by the way, I've been having trouble with Santa Muerte
Hmm.
lately, and I need some people to help me work through that. I mean, I'm a little shocked to say the least. Because I feel like it just seems I don't know how that doesn't feel out of place, you know. Um, so As far as community work and solo work and where these things can be, what kind of what kind of ideas kind of generate us more towards one or the other. I think one great place for solo work is when you realize that the people around you are so negative or
Yeah.
negatively oriented that solo work is just appropriate for you, because if you tell
Mhm.
anybody about it, they're throwing their lens of how it should go or what you're doing, or
Mhm.
disagreeing. Or if the people around you can't get past their own negative experiences, I think that's a
Mhm.
great place for solo work. So like if you're talking about, oh, I want to create a change in my life, ideally that's one to one or by yourself kind of
Mhm.
work. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. We do with Cusp, of course. Our whole gig is about making personal life changes
Oh, I see.
and incorporating those into the ritual, so that every ritual we're doing something to work on the individual goals as a group. Um, but at the same time, that being said, we will always have times that we want to do solo work. And so with group work, I mean, to just really synopsize that, which leads us, well into solo work, is that your positives are that you've got, if you can do it, if it's done right, you're going to have a huge amount of energy going toward your goal.
Mm-hmm.
Always good. The challenge is making sure it's done right. And also leading into solo, there's some things you don't want to put out there into a
Sure.
group. There's some things that are personal that you really just want to work on with yourself or with mentors, so that it's not group knowledge that you're going through a bankruptcy, or it's not group knowledge that you need to heal from something that went on being abused as a child.
Mhm.
uh, you don't always want your business out there, no matter how close your working group is. And solo work, what's interesting about solo work is I have found that for people that really invest magically, and I mean they're taking up the mantle, they're working hard at it. They are living the magical life every day. They're incorporating it into the way they are in the world. They're not what I would call Sunday Christians, where they're just going to church on Sunday. We have some people that are, they'll show up every 6 weeks for Sabbath in full Ren Fair gear, and they'll adopt a British accent when they're calling in the quarters. And it's just a big deal. But when they're out there in the world, you don't see any indications of faith. You don't see any indications of putting positive energy into the world. You don't see any accountability for how they're affecting the people around them. So there's all of these check boxes that you want to see in somebody who's working to magically actualize, which we're
Mhm.
talking decades for that. But when you have those people who are really working hard in their solo work and in their one-on-one work to move themselves forward, they usually hit a place along about middle age or a little bit later that they're not doing so much solo work. They really aren't lighting as many candles for themselves. They're not doing as many readings for themselves, because you hit a place of faith, and you hit a place where you have just dealt with all of the financial challenges and all of the interpersonal challenges over time, magically and practically, to the point that everything's okay. And you don't really feel the need to pull every little string and manipulate every part of energy that's coming along. You start to realize that you can trust this process that you have become a part of, to the point that you're really not doing that much work. I can literally not remember the last time I lit a candle for myself
Mm.
that wasn't uncrossing, that wasn't where somebody had attacked me, or I had worked on somebody and picked something up, where I was
Right.
just trying to clean out. That's the only work I've done for myself in literally years.
And I think age is not an issue here. I mean, I think that there can be fluctuations of that for sure. To me, the most apparent fluctuation is, or well, I'm using myself as an example, and then just some things that I've seen where you get to a place in your journey where things are relatively smooth. You know, the conductor is driving the train very smoothly, but then you approach a transition, and then you might
Mhm.
pick up the
Sure.
tools again and start doing,
Sure.
the same kinds of rituals and things like that again. At
Yeah,
least that's what stands out when you are
absolutely.
describing this period where you don't need
And,
as many candles.
and I've seen 80-year-olds that just don't get it. And by it, I mean the universal it. They are just not fluid. They are not walking in tandem with the universe. They are not
Mhm.
in tune with how things is. I mean, they just don't get it. And I have seen 40-year-olds who knock it out of the ballpark, that you feel healed when you're just sitting and talking with them, that you can
Mhm.
tell that they really have a sense of what it's like to be a supernatural soul having a natural human experience. They have made their peace with that, and
Right.
they're out for the joy and for uh, the integration into life. And so really age is just junk. Age is not even a factor. It's
Right.
more of how hard have you worked. And I've actually seen people, my son Dylan is one of these assholes. He came into the world at peace, and he's 25 years old, and he is always at peace. And we don't know how he does it. We don't know what is going on with this person, but he has always been too good for this world. He has had struggles, he has had
Mhm.
psychological challenges, but never did he let it change who he was as a person in a negative way. And that just amazes me. That wasn't me. I mean, I was not that person at all. His dad was not that person. So I don't know. I don't know where that comes from. But yeah, so age is not relevant to the ability to live a magical life in the magical way.
Yeah. One of the other benefits to solo work that I see and feel is the ability to use divine inspiration. And what I mean is, yes, there is value in working and practices and following the letter of the law because there's power and energy behind doing something in the precise way that humans have done it for hundreds of years, which is why, like, the Lord's Prayer feels the way
Mhm.
it does when you're not entrenched in like patriarchal thoughts and things of that nature. It is somewhat of a powerful prayer, and I'll say more than somewhat because people still use it in exorcisms and things like that.
Yep.
And it's because it's been said and activated the same way for hundreds of years. And
Mhm.
so there's power in that. And there's power in inspiration where a ritual or a magical working or a energy working calls for Kapal, and you really want to use juniper because Kapal doesn't resonate with you, or well, in my case, sage, when it calls for sage, and I'm like, I want to use juniper because I don't really resonate with sage a whole lot, and there are no politics in me about it. It's not about how it's overgrown or over harvested. It just, I don't like it. And but juniper, kicks ass, and it does what
Yep.
it needs to do, and
It does.
every single time without fail. So and I feel like it like I'm defending juniper. And another thing, it stops burning when it's supposed to stop burning, unless it's not supposed
It's not a show off, huh?
to.
You know,
So,
Zora Neale Houston actually said, or Hurston, I'm sorry, not Houston. Zora Neale Hurston said that the Bible is the greatest conjure book ever written. And
oh,
I think it's just for
valid.
the reasons that you talked about. that these
Yeah.
words have been said in faith over and over and over and over. And sage has been used in faith over and over. Juniper has been used in faith over and over and over. And that's why they work.
Small side quest for Heidi Pamela. You use it for everything. That's that's the answer. You use juniper for everything. Particularly, I like it for banishing energies. If there is anything deeply rooted or stuck, um, I've used it for people that won't leave me alone when I've asked. Um,
Yeah, there you go. No,
oh, I
Juniper
meant
is
to click
actually
this.
the major component in our GTFO incense. It's the
Oh, is
base that
it?
we build everything onto. Yeah.
Yeah. You got to get rid of something or somebody. And death can't be involved. Juniper.
Yeah, yeah. One of the things you mentioned about the difference, and I see you, Elspeth. One of the things that's different about solo work versus even mentor work is you have to walk the line and know the difference in speaking versus silence. Now, the witch's pyramid says to know, to dare, to will, and to be silent. And those are the dictates: to know what it is you need to do, to dare to do it, to put your willpower into it, and then to shut the fuck up about it. And you have these people that do magical work and they just talk endlessly about what they did, and that
Mm,
just bleeds all the energy out of it. At the same time, there are times when speaking is powerful. If you're
right.
speaking a truth or you're speaking about something that has damaged you for a long time. And so, really, between the idea of working completely solo versus working with a mentor one on one, really look at the power of, is this something I need to be silent about? Or is this something I need to use my voice for?
And to Elsbeth's comment, yes, maybe one day. I find that people that have trouble, like maybe in the way that Elsbeth is describing, and of course, you haven't put in your details, so we don't know the whole situation. But what if you're supposed to create your group?
Mm,
I mean, there is space for you just to be a solo person, and that's just how you operate, because there's probably enough energetic people around you that are like whispering in your ear and asking you to offer this or heal that.
mhm.
Um, and maybe you're the one, you're the group creator, and that just hasn't. That's been why it's hard. Um, I find the same thing with people searching for mentorship or searching for um, uh, events that they can't find. These are usually the progenitors of something, and that's why they don't fit in the box. So
And
food for
one of the big detriments to group work of any kind, whether it's universal or it's coven work or whatever, community work, whatever it might be, one of the biggest detriments is you have to people. And
that's a big
anytime you
detriment.
get a group of people together, that's the biggest detriment. That's the biggest drawback to group work is people,
Yeah.
because you're always going to have those stereotypes, those archetypes of people that's in any group dynamic. And I just have a very low tolerance for annoyance. And there's times I don't want to get to know people better. I like you. I really like you a lot. And I'm really afraid if I get to know you better, I'm not going to like you anymore. You know?
You and
And
Elizabeth are on the same page.
yeah. And so I have to be very selective about the groups I'm working with, because I don't want my magical work to be that of being irritated with people.
Oh
I
no.
mean, there was a time when I was running a coven. This is no lie. Bram, this is not you. Don't immediately think it is. You might know who it is, but it's not you. Where I had to, and see, that's why I get uncomfortable when I'm talking about coven work, because Bram's right here. She's been in my coven for like 10 years. um, and I want to just point out, not you, Bram, where I had to, when I was trying to project how much time a ritual was going to take, I would add an extra 20 minutes because I know this person over here is going to have something to comment on everything I do, everything I say. I'm going to have to allow an extra 2 minutes for them to chime in on what's happening. And that can be irritating. So there's times I even get irritated within my own group. It's not common. And this was a long time ago. This was not recently. But yeah, you got a people, and you have to play those tools sometimes. And that's one of the values of solo work, is you really ideally like the person you're working with. So and it's you.
I smell sage and I sneezed. Yeah, sage is off-putting for
I
me.
love sage. Love sage. I
When
love the fact that even now when I burn it and my adult kids are here, they sit down and shut up just like they used to when they were kids. It's like Pavlov and his sage.
the Pavlov sage, the only time I reconnected with sage really was in your class. You were like, "Yeah, we
Mm.
read the smoke," and I was like, you don't know how hard I tried to convince
Oh, you can
Juniper.
read juniper smoke too.
It was like, listen, I'm here to do a job. And it was like it would not let me read it. And I was like, all right, I guess we're gonna use sage for this little section here
Oh,
of
if
smoke reading.
juniper wouldn't work you couldn't read the juniper?
Mm-mm,
That
did not want to do
surprises me. That really
And it
surprises
could
me
just
because
be a
usually
me
it
thing,
billows.
right?
Yeah,
It
juniper is
always
very.
that was the thing. It was like there was no break in the consistency of like Juniper was like,
Mhm.
the plumber and I'm here to get it all out.
Oh,
And I
can
was
you
like, well, I
use
love you for that, but
can you
I
use
need to read
Palo?
you. Yeah, yeah. Palo
Yeah.
Santo's pretty sensitive.
Now, is
Um,
it all the salvias or is it just white sage? Can you use
just
sagebrush?
white.
Just white?
I love
Abs-
blue. I
yeah, blue
love
sage is great.
it's not
The Shasta
California.
sage, and
There you go. Yeah.
yeah, use that. That'll work fine.
Okay. I should have asked that in class because I've been suffering.
The only reason I use the white sage in class is that it universally works. It
Sure.
it does the billowing, it does the contracting, it'll go out, the whole bit. So
Yeah.
it's just fewer moving parts for class.
Less complex personality.
Yeah, wow.
Um, so one other area of community versus solo work that I wanted to touch on was readings. I am not a huge fan of group readings. It's a lot of competing energy. It's not even about the talking. I believe that we all pick up on um, different frequencies when we're doing readings and tapping into that field. And so when you're in a group and there's an exchange of like, well, I'm picking up on this and I'm picking up on that, if that group's too large or it's incohesive, um, it's like being in a room full of screaming people. For me personally, um, I know it sounds terrible, and it is. It is terrible, which is why I don't attend them. There's only been one group. It was Beth Carlton's angel reading group, and I think it was all her. Like I think she was just able to contain the energy that circulated through that group. But other than that, like I've had the worst experience. So I think I say that to say, like we're distinguishing some places where community work is great and solo work is great. I think solo readings are great. The community reads are a bit of a challenge. But all in all, have you ever done community reads like in a group?
I am trying to think if I have. Um, the closest I've come would be the healing classes,
Okay.
where people were working together toward diagnostics from
Okay.
a scholarly perspective. But I don't think I've done. Now, I've done group meditations with the Gestalt method, where everybody is participating in one meditation and contributing to it and talking about it.
Oh yeah, we talked about that on the
Yeah, but
show.
I don't think I've done what I would call readings.
Yeah. So not reading the energy of a person, but like literally cards are out or
No,
trying to receive channeled messages
no,
from each individual person is too much. It's
yeah,
too much.
no.
Uh, so, as far as community work and group work, great things to pursue, celebrations, Sabbaths. But even as we've and covenant work, even as we've discussed it, it seems like it's important to highlight your beliefs, your personal intentions, and the group's intentions, recognizing whether or not the group is focused on healing and taking turns with the individual versus doing something for everyone or on a global scale. All of these things are great ways to evaluate, am I going to participate in this group, am I going to hold this group? And then in solo work, some great things are being able to deal with your personal traumas and not be outed or not feel judged. Um, Being able to focus so much without the noise of negative thoughts and filters from others, and then also being inspired to maybe um, instead of grabbing one thing, grabbing another, or including things or excluding things, you get your own opportunities to celebrate. And I want to say I had like on my list of what's great community work and what's good solo work, I had both birthdays on both lists. I am a huge fan of celebrating my birthday alone by myself. I don't exist with people that believe the same. So um, from my perspective, when you celebrate your birthday on your own, you can go wherever it is that you're going to go. You don't have to worry about, a group coming with you to celebrate. So if you want to leave the country, you can, or go to a different state just in the middle of the night if you want to. And you can set intentions without influence from others being like, oh, well, what are you going to do now that you're da, 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 and having to explain or defend or justify. And so I don't know. I like birthdays alone. Do you have a preference, Katrina?
I can't really say that I do. I enjoy my birthdays very much, no matter how they roll out. I like being alone. I'm very much a hermit. But what'll happen is I'll get to the end of the day and I'm like, those motherfuckers didn't even call. What is this? So I really don't know how to answer that. I'm going to be honest because my birthday has always been so personal to me that, I never know how I'm going to react. And I don't like to be surprised. That's the only thing is I don't like to suddenly be in a group of a whole shitload of people. Like if Eric were to ever, and this has not happened, if Eric were to ever say, hey, come on, I'm going to take you out to dinner for your birthday. And in my head, I'm all wound up just for a nice, quiet, elegant dinner with him. And I walked into a room full of my nearest and dearest, I would not dig on that. Um, and it's a lot of it is just the Virgo feeling of I don't like change and I like predictability. And so getting surprised isn't always my big thing. Now, getting surprised with a wonderful gift, that's different. But I'm
Right.
talking about the evening is going to go different than what we thought it was going to.
Fair. That's fair. I mean, one or two people, oh, it's so nice to see you. That's cool. But like 50, 100 people, surprise. Like I've never had that jump out moment. And I'm glad.
Yeah, I got to prep for that. I got to, with the empathic stuff, I've got to be shored up to go into a group of a bunch of people.
Yeah.
And when I'm going, just out to land ocean or something, I'm not paying attention to anybody but Eric. Whatever's happening around is no big deal. But if I suddenly have to throw the switch and go into super social, it's very hard for me.
Yeah, it's that switch is rusted over. You didn't let me DSLR it, and so I can't.
Yeah. It's
And
sort of
Bram is
like
the same.
it's kind of like surprise. You've got to give a speech. What?
No. But it's clear, as most things on the show, that there isn't a black and white. I think we've talked about a lot of awesome ways to evaluate what and where you can apply community energy and solo energy. It's it seems like it'll be probably closer to the moment, like, evaluating, hey, do I need support, or should I maybe bow out and do this on my own? Thank you guys so much for your participation. Loved every minute of it. And we look forward to seeing you next week, and to see your comments after this too. Have maybe you have stories about why you don't participate in groups and why you do, and what's it like. So we'd love to hear from you, and we'll catch you next time on Crossroads of Cognizance, everyone.